So I'm going to go ahead and record also for our purposes.
I want to if this is
okay with that. So if you need to see follow up for this, I can provide that too. And it sounds like I'm getting a little feedback from this. So somebody might want to turn off their microphone unless they ask a question or the sound in there. So anyway, the first thing I want to do is kind of go over Western Online, where most of the class will be administered. And then I will give a bit of a lecture, talk about the homework assignments that are coming up, and then discuss a little bit of, obviously in this, we're going to talk a little bit about how the class is structured, or at least how it is so far. The idea again is, I don't know, Atoki, I notice your microphone's on. I don't know if it's getting some feedback. If you could turn your, Ibrahim, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the class right now. So you'll see that a lot of it's, well, actually everything will be on Western Online for the most part, except down the road in about 3 or 4 weeks, I'd like to start developing either in-class labs or online labs of some sort. And so I've already mentioned in my email to you that you have the option of either one. It's obviously those labs are still worth the same amount of points. It's just how about we go about getting those points, whether it be the online, when I say online lab, it may be some type of self-directed project, some assignments, or I may figure out a way to get you some insects to do your own experiment in your home or whatever. These would be, if I can get that all arranged, I'll send you some beetles that you would mix in with some bean plants, bean seeds, excuse me, that you can get in Walmart or something like that. That's one idea for the online assignments. And you can switch off if you decide later down the road you want to do in-class lab. And then for the in-class lab, it's going to be looking at some caterpillars feeding on plants. So that's kind of what I have in mind for this, for the last 12 weeks of the class or something like that. Okay, so the idea is that you'll get to do some real research projects. So you'll be involved with, whether you're doing them online or with me, I'm gonna try to have you do something kind of novel, whether it be synthesizing some idea. We'll kind of figure that out as we go. It'll be something that you can help discuss with me what you might want to do. Does that make sense? So we'll try to develop something. It might be a research paper, or you'll do an actual research project, well, a laboratory-based research project with me and my grad students. And so anyway, on Western Online, you can see that I'm sure you're familiar with this. Going under assessments, everything right now is currently under assignments. And I'm slowly updating it. And I haven't got them in order yet, but next week you'll have these 2 assignments and it'll show up at the top, and probably shows up a little differently for you. But basically every week you'll have a couple assignments. And again, the assignments are is going to be reading a research paper or 2, or watching a video on a research topic. So one of the ideas I want from this class is not only for you to learn a little bit about plant-animal interactions, but also to have some idea about how to do research projects, or at least think about science in the form of doing science. So that's one of the goals I'm trying to instill from you. So even when I give you some of my presentation from some of my research, I'm hoping you can get some ideas about how research works. You may have been involved in research projects, but that's one of the goals I'm trying to do for this class. So it's kind of heavily geared towards what does it mean to be a scientist and stuff like that. The idea again is a lot of you are juniors and seniors, so you're kind of moving past just taking introductory classes and really learning about science. And of course, we have some grad students here too. So again, the dates aren't all updated yet, but the idea is that you should try to work on these assignments. I'd jump on them pretty early so that but they're basically done. They're due the night before Tuesday. So everything's going to be due Monday night on average. Okay. And you don't want to wait till the last minute on Monday to do them, just because, it ends up, you won't really learn that much, because really it takes a little bit of time to really read a research paper and digest it. It also takes time to watch a video. It might be an hour video, but it still takes time. And I've noticed a lot of times students can try to skimp on really watching the video. They might watch 10 minutes and try to throw something together. So I'm really trying to get you to take your time and learn and think about what you're watching or what you're reading. People that have taken some classes with me before, a lot of the summary is just demonstrating to me that you did the work. So I'm really grading as much on completion as anything for the basic assignments. And then down the road, we'll have some type of take-home exam. And then usually I do a follow-up oral kind of exam for my upper division students, just to demonstrate you learned a few things. And so that'll all be through arrangement, but you'll have at least 3 or 4 good weeks to know ahead of time before that happens. And again, that'll show up on this assignments. So everything should be under assignments. Again, some of these, like I said, right now I just have the next 2 weeks planned out, but I will start working on the rest of them, and they will start being filled up pretty quickly.
But you're not saying we have an assignment it's not due next week though, right?
No, yes, you will, on the 25th.
Okay, where is it at?
It's right now currently at the bottom. I'll put it, just needs to be reordered. So I just have to go up here and reorder it.
Okay.
But, it's currently just sitting at the bottom, just because when you update it, they throw it at the bottom. So it's just one of these quirks in Western Online. But once I go through and reorder it, you'll see it here. But I think either way, it shows up on the calendar on the student end. So you should see something on the calendar already.
So there's no syllabus then?
There is a syllabus. Again, it's basically this right here, right? So, but the syllabus also will include the research project. And so it should be, there should be syllabus sitting on here. Let me see if I'll see if I can pull one up in a little bit. If not, I'll email you one tonight. But the syllabus is, as you kind of already mentioned, Lindsay, is basically just what you're seeing here, plus the research project and probably 2 exams. Does that make sense? But I will send you the updated syllabus. Usually it's already on here. Maybe it's under, but I don't see it right now when I'm thumbing through this. If you go to the course content, you're going to see where the readings are, but I may be updating this too. So don't worry too much about the readings here, because I'll put them I will put them under the assignments. So like when you go to the first summary, it's going to be the actual reading PDF will be in there this evening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to confirm. You said the assignment, you're grading it based on completion at the moment, but you said later on it's going to get more intense. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, actually, I probably grade a little tougher at the beginning for some of those. Just because because what I find is if you go too easy at first, on the grades, people tend to get weaker on their assignments. I'd rather be a little hard-nosed at the beginning.
Okay. So this is not based on completion. You're like really wanting us to work at this.
Well, I mean, yeah, when well, like if you have to write a 1-page summary, for instance, and if you send me half a page and it's double spaced and the paragraph has been set up to be really small and the topic seems kind of vague compared to what you should have gotten out of it, then that's a pretty good indication that you didn't do the work. And then you'll probably get knocked some points down. I'm pretty challenging getting, you have to show you quite a bit of work to get the A, but a lot of people can get a C by just going through the motions, if that makes sense. It's kind of a steep. So it probably benefits the D student to get a C, but it doesn't, but the A student really has to get an A. Does that make sense? But it's kind of based on my calculations in my brain. But again, obviously the exams can be part of it too, and that will represent about 25% of the grade, and the research project will represent about 30% of the grade also. Any other basic questions on that? I can say that the grades tend to be been done in past classes for this particular class, and the type of students that usually sign up for the class. Most people usually get a B or an A in the class by just working hard at it. You know what I mean? So, because I think usually that's what I see in this type of class, more B, A students versus the introductory classes. The other thing is, like I said, there'll be some online exams. It'll be questions that I'll give you up front early, and then you just need to kind of prepare your answers for it. And so some people that, they're taking animal physiology, like Megan or Kylie, know kind of what to expect, or Morgan and Kylie, really try to rehearse your answers and you'll do well. Okay. Any other questions? So again, next week, and then again, and after that, I'm going to start a lecture with y'all and talk about science a little bit. But next week, you need to watch this video here. It's a real fun one, and we might even start a little bit of it. I don't know how easy it is to start it tonight, but it's this one right here. I'm going to go ahead and give you an introduction to it for a second, if it'll show up. And if not, you just have to watch it later. But I wonder if I can get it to open. I wonder if you can even see it. I wanted to show it just because I wanted to point out some scientists. Can you actually see this?
Yes.
So you can see that.
They don't have eyes or ears.
So let me give you a heads up on this one. And sometimes we watch a little bit in class, but I figure you guys can do this as well. And we might go over it a little bit and talk about it at the next meeting. So it'll be a little bit of a flip the classroom, where I want you to be able to provide a little discussion at times. Does that make sense? So the neat thing about this video here is it's going to talk about how plants communicate with one another, and then how they kind of deal with herbivory. A big part of plant-animal interactions, of course, is either pollination or herbivory. Most of the animals that we talk about will be insects, because obviously they're the greatest number of herbivores on the planet. Even if you think about cows and deer and elk and any kind of, those big herbivores, but the reality is insects are the big herbivores. And the neat thing about being a scientist for me is I know quite a few of the scientists actually in this program through meetings, and they know who I am too, which is kind of cool. So like this person here, Consuelo, talks about her research, at least it was got a lot of notoriety was there was a parasitic plant that actually will wrap around a tomato plant as it grows, and it can pick up on the volatiles of the plant. Does anybody know what a volatile is? And if not, you can sit back passively. It's a little different than a classroom, isn't it? But where I'm used to seeing people stare at me. But volatiles are like perfumes that a plant will give off. So like if you ever mowed a lawn, you smell fresh cut lawn, you're smelling volatiles. That's the wounded plant. So Consuelo, who's in this video, is the scientist with her partner and husband. This is Consuelo, and I think his name's Matt. I can't remember now, but they were at Penn State University for quite the longest time, and now they're working in Switzerland, last I remember. And so this plant will actually pick up on it, the smells. Let me show you this. It's really cool. And again, you'll go back and watch this, but I just want you to get some ideas of what.
Capture the scent of a tomato, essentially condensing the chemical odor released by the plant. Once it's distilled, they present the tomato perfume to the vine.
So what they did is they had a bag, they collect some of this volatiles through this vial, and then they condense it through all sorts of chemistry. And then, of course, as they said, they put it in this vial.
Along with a real tomato, it can't possibly smell.
So this is the parasitic plant right here. Now, the thing about this being a parasitic plant is it actually doesn't have chlorophyll. So it doesn't do its own photosynthesis. So it has to basically parasitize, like this tomato plant here, to get the nutrients it needs to live. And so it basically needs to, find its host. So the one thing I think you should get out of this a little bit is that plants have behaviors. It's, we always think about animals having behaviors, but plants actually have a type of behavior too. And then then it starts getting into dissecting what is a behavior and response. I know Dr. Pierre might have a different opinion about what behaviors is, but if you start getting into really thinking about how the brain works, that's chemistry, right? So, and anyway, that's kind of moving a little bit, but watch what this plant can do.
Time after time, the daughter hones in on the chemical language that says, yes, I'm a tomato.
So this is the parasite is the daughter plant, as I mentioned. And then apparently it could pick up on the smells of the tomato. It went through that little piece of rubber or whatever, that because it had the perfumes put onto it, but it didn't go to the tomato plant because obviously it was enclosed and couldn't smell it. And this is time-lapse photography.
There's choice involving a suitable host or non-suitable host. This is a very familiar thing in animal foraging behavior that we're seeing in this plant foraging behavior.
But the daughter isn't the only plant that's exhibiting animal-like behavior. Once it's under full-scale daughter attack, the tomato releases the chemical equivalent of a scream. In fact, many plants emit a chemical SOS when they're under attack, and we've all caught a whiff of it. It's the smell of freshly cut grass.
We all love the smell of freshly cut grass. We all love the smell of flowers that we put into a vase. We all love the smells of plants. But those smells mean one thing to us than they mean to the other individuals in that environment. And we are causing stress. We are causing trauma to these plants. It's the plant's way of calling out for help.
So if it's a cry for help, who or what are plants calling out to?
Now, this next person is actually really famous in my field. and we're going to get into it in a little while, but some of my research I did when I was a PhD student was to work with tobacco plants. Because of obviously you probably know what is the chemical, one of the most famous chemicals in tobacco plants that's actually functions as a toxin to the plant, for the plant. And what do you think that toxin does? I'm assuming some of you probably can guess, of course. Tobacco plant is famous for making nicotine, right? And so nicotine is actually a chemical that is anti-inhibitory. I mean, it actually can kill you. You take a little drop of nicotine, it can actually kill you, stop your heart. Well, this chemical was what, and nicotine was actually one of the first chemicals used like in greenhouses as an insecticide. Well, there's wild tobacco plants and things like that. And then there are some caterpillars that are specialized to feeding on tobacco plants and can kind of overcome it. Or maybe the interesting thing is, remember that idea of the scream for help? Plants, when they get wounded, not only will they change their chemistry and turn on their immune-like system, they'll actually release volatiles that can actually attract wasps to fly in that are predators to the caterpillar and sting it. I don't know if you realize this, but most wasps or parasitic wasps are about the size of a gnat. You wouldn't even know it was a wasp unless you've taken an entomology class. And they'll sting the caterpillar and lay eggs inside it. And if you happen to see the movie Alien or Aliens, where the alien pops out of the guy's chest, it was a famous horror movie back in the 70s or so. That's what happens when the wasp has stung the caterpillar, will actually lay the eggs inside it. The larvae will begin to grow inside the caterpillar and eventually pop out as baby, or not baby wasp, but as wasp. So anyway, this guy here is Ian Baldwin, and he's like one of the most famous scientists in the realm of plant caterpillar insect interactions.
Well, if this unassuming desert plant is any indication, they may be calling in some pretty effective reinforcements. Insects that eat the insects that eat them. The desert isn't the most welcoming place for people, but it can be an ecological nightmare for some plants. Unlike us, plants can't escape the heat or walk for miles to find water, nor can they run and hide when they're attacked by insects. But it's precisely because they can't move that plants have evolved some pretty nifty methods of self-defense.
We used to think, or used to view plants sort of as just sitting there, whatever happens, happens, they make their seeds and they go on. But we're realizing it's much more complex. They're actively engaging with the environment in which they live. They actively communicate, they actively respond to the nutrients and the predators and the herbivores that are around them. It's a really dynamic system. So when you take a look at a plant, and if you were to rip off a leaf, and then think about this from the plant's point of view, what just happened was something came around and ate some of its body. And so this plant that was just damaged by me ripping it off is likely to start changing its defensive chemistry. It can start communicating with its neighbors or insects, and all those processes begin.
And here in the Utah desert, there's a wild species that's showing us just how dynamic plants are when it comes to self-defense. It's called Nicotiana attenuata, the wild tobacco plant. For more than a decade, Ian Baldwin has been studying the wild tobacco and the amazing ways it responds to threats in its environment.
This plant's genome has probably
just a heads up, if in a few minutes, would you guys sign back in? Since I apparently don't have the professional. So when it closes, take a 5-minute break and then come back on, and then we'll continue the class, because as you know, it's about technically a 2 or 3 hour class, right? So again, when we get knocked out and I have to reopen the Zoom, this is your chance to take a 5-minute, 10-minute break. And then I'll begin the lecture after we finish up a few more aspects of this video here.
Of order of magnitude more genes involved.
So here in this picture, this is Ian Baldwin. He's actually works out in Germany at the Max Planck Institute. I got to visit him and his institute, or he's one of the, not his institute, but where he worked. He's been there forever now. So that's in Jena, Germany. And so anyway, this is the wild tobacco plant. And you saw a caterpillar on it somewhere. So here's the caterpillar. This is most likely Manduca sexta, which is known as the tobacco hornworm. And it's known as being the hornworm because it has a little horn at the end of it looks like a tail on the caterpillar.
Has probably an order of magnitude more genes involved in environmental perception than most animals do. Most plants have to, because they sit still and they have to really tune their physiology and biochemistry to what's going on. And they need a very sophisticated system of perception and response. And being able to respond quickly is essential for wild tobacco, because its seeds need wildfire to kickstart their growth. And they can wait for hundreds of years for that to happen. So when they finally do emerge, they may face enemies they've never seen before. It has no idea what it's going to face when it germinates out of seed bank and has to cope with whatever's there. There are all these other organisms that reign in on this habitat that's just been cleared out by a fire. Just about every part of the plant is attacked in a different way by a specialist that feeds on that particular part. It's a very complex problem they got to solve.
That's the Manduca sexta again.
One problem.
The tobacco hornworm.
These are as plentiful as desert sunlight. But it turns out that the wild tobacco has a secret chemical weapon to deploy. As soon as an herbivore attacks, it ramps up a toxin, one that some of us are all too familiar with. It's evolved a toxin that will poison any organism that has a muscle, and that is this molecule called nicotine, the one that human beings have such a relationship with. So anything that moves and wants to eat this plant is going to be poisoned by this thing. But while its nicotine cocktail poisons some bugs, it has absolutely no impact on this one. In fact, the hornworm caterpillar can mow down a tobacco plant in a matter of days. But this cunning little plant has a few more defensive tricks up its leaves. Once the caterpillar starts feeding, the plant's leaves release an SOS. Chemical messages that drift up into the air, where they're picked up by the enemies of their enemies. Predators that just love feasting on caterpillars. Several jackers in this area, right? And if you find it hard to believe that plants can call in insect mercenaries, Baldwin has proof. In one experiment, he captured the chemical signals released by the leaves of plants that were under attack. Then he glued caterpillar eggs onto a leaf, smeared them with the chemical scent, and waited to see if anyone would show up.
So that's a caterpillar and an egg. We call that the first instar, by the way.
Within a matter of hours, this insect has responded to the plant's call for help. It's called the big-eyed bug, a pint-sized predator that devours eggs and larvae alike.
Obviously, you can watch more of this but for this part, but realize that basically an SOS signal was sent out. We call that an indirect defense. So remember the nicotine that was in tobacco plants? That was directly toxic to a lot of animals. This caterpillar is pretty resistant to it because it's a specialist, it's an evolved resistance to it. But that toxin is directly effective. So we call that a direct defense. And then the SOS signal, that's a volatile that's released, is an indirect defense because it's attracting a predator that will then attack the caterpillar. Does that make sense to everybody? So direct defense is one that attacks the insect right away, and an indirect pulls it in. Now here's another couple, so these are a couple terms that I'm hoping you're at least kind of putting little notes together. Indirect and direct, and then there's also constitutive defense. I could write it, but it's like CONSTITUTIVE or something like that. Constitutive defense. That's a defense that's always present. So like nicotine is always present in the tobacco plant, so that's constitutive. And then there's also what we call inducible defense. That's a defense that is stimulated or turned on. What is an inducible defense? Well, inducible means, after the caterpillar's been chewing on the plant defenses will rise and increase. And actually, nicotine is increasing as well because of that chewing. So nicotine is an inducible defense and a constitutive defense in tobacco plants. But we'll get into more different types of plant defenses a little bit later. Let me see if there's anything else I really want to give you out of this video before we run out of time. This part will be really interesting to you. What we found out, or what they found out, is that the root systems and fungi interact with these different plants in this forest, so that in a sense it's kind of like, do you remember that movie Avatar, where like there was a mother tree that could kind of like coordinate the forest or something like that? Well, there's some evidence for that, where an older tree can provide nutrients to another tree and signal and tell, alter its plant defenses and things like that. So that'll be kind of interesting to you too. And so that's what they found out in this discussion. So anyway, so that's what this will be one of the videos that you'll watch for next week. Now, when you return in about 5 or 10 minutes, so we'll say it's looks like it's 4:35. So let's go ahead and meet again at 4:45, and then I'm going to continue lecturing with one of my PowerPoints, and we'll do that for maybe another 30 or 40 minutes, and then that'll wrap up today's class. Sound good for everybody? Okay, so hopefully I'll see everybody back in about 10 minutes or so at 4:45. Okay, I'll see you soon. Take care.